Welcome to week 3 of Cabin Fever. I hope you enjoyed last week. I know I've watched my parenting and my children's behavior transform, and it's all from using these pride skills that we learned. If you haven't already, take time in your group and talk about last week. How did your parenting go? Was there any improvement? Did you have a chance to use these skills? Well, this week we're talking about working from home. Many of us, we've transitioned from an office setting to, well, an in-home office. And at first it was fun and it was exciting and we had all this freedom. Well, the honeymoon phase is kind of worn off for many of us, and the struggle is real. And so today I hope you learn some really practical advice, some tips on how to be more productive working from home as I interview business leader Matt Childs. Well, welcome. I'm here with Matt Childs, who is my in-home expert at working in home. Matt, thanks for joining us today.
That's pretty clever, Kevin. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Well, as many of us are in this boat of all of a sudden we find ourselves working from home, and I've never worked from home my whole life. And because of this current season, I find I'm working at home and my wife is working at home and my kids are at home and my dog is at home, and I'm trying to be productive in all this, but you've been doing this for several years now. You've transitioned from an office setting to a kind of a home office. Talk to us a bit about how do you remain productive working from home since you've already done it?
That's a great question. We work from home. My wife and I, we have 2 little kiddos and we both work from home, and usually it's a chaotic household in the background. So it's not easy to maintain focus and sustain high level productivity. But one of the first things that we did was, when we made the transition, was to establish really a physical structure. So we transitioned a portion of our house for the 2 of us into individual offices. So everything from creating stand-up desks to second monitors to identifying where our pens and papers and folders should be, to whiteboards. There's a lot of different things that we've done physically to replicate a typical in-person office. So that way we can create that location here at home.
I love it. So it takes a bit of an investment, either from your work investing into it, or maybe just from you personally investing into setting this up.
It's true. What's interesting, 3M tape was my best friend. In case of a whiteboard or something that you want to mount on a wall, you can use the removable 3M tape, and it's great actually when you're in the COVID-19 setting, because this may be temporary for most people. So you may not want to drill into your walls, but 3M tape would be easily to have a removable structure. That's how we can replicate an office pretty quick and easily. And
Love
even
that.
With your, and even with your space, in your own home, try to dedicate that space. So, for instance, in a living room, my suggestion would be do not work in a living room, because there's too many distractions, and your mind and your body have associated with your living room with comfort, and you really need to find a space that your brain associates with work on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I like that, because I know once I go into my living room, it's snack and it's a TV show. And those don't mix well with high productivity for work. So tell me, Matt, a little bit about some of the routines that you've set up working from home.
For me personally, my routine, I try to keep as stable as possible, specifically when I transition from an office to an at-home office. So for me, it hasn't changed a whole lot, and the suggestion would be don't change your routine. So the intent would be start with the first 7 minutes of your day, right, in devotions. That's probably what you should be doing at first. But if you go to work at a certain time, if you go to work at 7, 8, 9 a.m. in the morning, well, you should be at your desk at that same time. So if you arrive at 9 a.m., be at your desk at 9 a.m. If you typically leave the office and get in your car around 4, 5, or 6, then that should be your time to leave your home desk as well. So the benefit in today's world is you just get back that drive time, which is super helpful. And that way you can use it for other things, like being with your family, maybe doing devotions, working out, doing something productive with that time. So another thing to consider is setting boundaries. So doing that with your kids, doing that with your spouse, and even doing that with your work. For your kids, at least mine, we've trained them to, when the door is closed, not to enter. And in fact, when the door is locked, they learned not even to knock, because they know that's the more important conference call or meeting or something. So it just becomes a routine. It might not be as easy right at the beginning, but it becomes a routine, and it's a learned skill. So setting boundaries is super helpful. And even little things like getting dressed, act like you're in the office. It can be very easy to just remain in sweats or pajamas for a good portion of the morning, or even the entire day, depending. And so would you go to the office unshowered? Well, probably not. So keep your routine, and making sure that's probably one of the biggest things to do is establishing and being disciplined about maintaining that structure.
Yeah, so you're building an in-home office, setting yourself up for success initially, and just getting the things you need to be productive. But then you also are setting pretty deliberate routines to work through your day. And so I understand that, but talk to us about the actual transition moment for you. What were some of the challenges transitioning from going into an office every day to going downstairs every day?
Again, it's establishing that new rhythm. And so again, that might be some of the hardest part for folks. It was for me. And so it's too easy to maybe work well into the night, work 9, 10, 11, midnight, because you feel like you have to, or you feel like you can. And so again, it goes back to the boundaries, setting boundaries with your kids, setting boundaries with your spouse, and setting boundaries again with your work. There's nothing wrong with sending an email at 11 p.m., but if you're consistently working from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. every single day, you probably need to adjust your priorities a bit and maybe reset your personal work and life schedule. Time will always get reallocated to something else, and so time management is extremely critical. Because if you don't schedule and plan your day, then any excess time will magically vanish.
Yeah.
And so kind of like your budget. We've talked about this in the past with budgets. If you don't plan for each dollar that you earn, again, that will magically vanish because you're going to spend it on things you just don't think about. So keeping that plan, keeping that schedule, being disciplined, and making sure you make the most of every minute of every day is a way to avoid some pitfalls during that transition.
Yeah, talking about time management, that seems like it's a critical piece of this, because honestly, I'm in my office, I've got my schedule, I've got my setup, but right next door is the living room where my couch is, and I can go take a nap or I can go watch a show. How do you resist that urge to go to the next room?
Well, I watch 2 movies instead. I just don't watch one, I watch 2. But no, but seriously, it's value driven. You're the same person pre-COVID that you are currently. So your values shouldn't have changed. Your work ethic shouldn't have changed. The location changes, but your work ethic and values and quality of work that you produce shouldn't matter on the location. So establishing those values as a worker, as an individual, and maintaining them is extremely impactful. One thing for me I learned early on is a verse that I just happened to stumble upon early on when I was transitioning, and it's in Proverbs 10:5, and it says something to the effect of, "He who gathers crops in the summer is a prudent son, but he who sleeps during the harvest is a disgraceful son." And that goes to laziness. You're talking about sleeping on the couch or watching TV, and so if I sleep during harvest, I am missing out, and I am actually a disgraceful son in the eyes of God. And so it goes back to my personal faith values that being like Christ, right? Because being a hard worker and being Christ-centered is really I should be focused on.
No, I love that. And sometimes we kind of get this newfound freedom, if you will, and we realize I haven't really taken the time to define who I am as a worker or some of my own values. So for someone who is kind of in that situation, what are some of the other values that drive you in your everyday life?
So for me, I consider myself a hard worker, and some of that has been from my upbringing, but some of that also is from my military background. And so really outperforming and hard working is something for me that motivates. But a couple other things. One is my family. working for my family and having them as my motivation is extremely impactful. When my kids maybe do knock on the door or I can hear them in the background, there's a tendency to be angry about that. But I've switched my train of thought to say, you know what, I'm actually doing this for them. And if I am distracted and I'm not performing appropriately, I'm actually hurting them in the long run. But in fact, my most important thing in my personal value is really remembering who I represent, and that's Christ. And in Colossians and Colossians 3:23, I believe, it says something like, whatever you do, work with it for all your heart and work as the Lord says, not for human masters, not for my boss, not for anybody else, but really working for the Lord. So remember that everything I do is for the glorification of Christ is really a main motivation for me.
I love this because values are there whether people are watching you or not watching you. So with this freedom, you're still going to be driven to be a productive worker like you are. Let me ask you a different question here. It's before it'd be easy to drop by somebody's office and just touch in with them and figure out what's going on or plan something to communicate with them. But with this kind of distancing and everyone working from home, how do you balance, is my coworker actually working? Are they actually being a team player? And how do you balance everyone working from home now?
That's a tricky one because again, you can't physically see them, right? So one thing that I struggle with is making assumptions. And so try not to make those assumptions about your coworkers. Guess what? They're probably doing the same thing to you, probably assuming that you are or are not performing. So you may need to switch from an outcome-based to an outcome-based approach. So meaning, as long as your coworkers are really meeting those deliverable timelines or doing what they should be doing from an outcome perspective, there really shouldn't be any issue. Really, and also this is really a good time to review those performance metrics and criteria, which can reinvigorate those values and metrics with the people you work with. So making sure that's top of mind. Giving people the benefit of a doubt until really proven otherwise. Until they actually prove you otherwise, you can't see them. So it's going to be hard again. And if you have doubt, you're making that assumption. And so it goes back to creating those assumptions. But during this time of COVID-19, community is what's needed. So honestly, pick up the phone. Communication and having open and transparent communication more often, more frequently, is extremely impactful. So during this time of isolation, really human connection is paramount. Charlie Salmon, the senior pastor at Church on the Ridge, has mentioned multiple times, we're physically distant, but we need to stay socially connected. So picking up that phone instead of emailing or texting, we are built for community, and our relationships, even virtual ones, should reflect that.
That's good. Really good. All right. Last question, then I'll let you go here. Thank you for spending some time with us. But some of us are kind of new to working from home. What are some of the advantages from working at home that I want to make sure we don't miss in this season?
There's many, and they'll be different for everybody. But for me, it's a fact that I can go downstairs or in another room and my kids are going to be there, or my spouse, Sari works from home as well, she's going to be there. So even during my 5-minute breaks, I go get some coffee or get another glass of water or something, but enjoying my kids and even my wife during lunch breaks or coffee breaks, that is super impactful for us. Just having that quality time. So dating your spouse, Sarah and I have had lunch dates at home. We purposely scheduled time to actually have lunch at home or later in the afternoon. Quality time. I don't have to commute for most days. So, taking that time back and actually reutilizing it is extremely impactful. And another one just on the business front is you can meet with a lot more people during this time. And so take advantage of it and actually reconnect with either suppliers or vendors or connections that you may have, because guess what? You can do it all across the nation, internationally through virtual options like Zoom. But those meetings won't take as long either. Because guess what? You're not driving somewhere. You're not taking a half hour to drive. You're not spending an hour to talk about things that could take 10 minutes. So a lot of my meetings are 15, 20, 30 minutes, when they usually would take maybe an hour, hour and a half. So you can actually be a lot more productive if you choose it wisely.
Love that. All right, man. Well, thank you for spending some time with us and sharing some insight from how you work from home. And I hope that all of us can be as productive as you are from home.
It's super fun, and yeah, I hope it was a benefit.
You bet. All right. See you, Matt.
Thanks.